Director Orson Krennic stood aboard his personal shuttle, the crisp white of his uniform contrasting sharply with the darkness of space outside the viewport. He was calm outwardly, but inwardly, a storm raged. The message he had received summoned him to an audience with the Emperor himself, a rarity for someone of Krennic's rank. Grand Moff Tarkin's influence often ensured that any matters involving the Death Star project went through him, leaving Krennic to languish in his shadow. Yet, this was a moment for him to claim what he believed was his due. As the shuttle descended into the atmosphere of Coruscant, the sprawling city planet sparkled with endless lights. The Imperial Palace loomed above all else, its towering spires a testament to the Emperor's absolute dominion. Krennic tightened his gloves, brushing imaginary dust off his cape. He needed to be composed, authoritative. If the Emperor had summoned him directly, it meant he was seen, acknowledged. This thought brought a flicker of pride. The audience chamber was vast and cold, its oppressive atmosphere heightened by the dim lighting and the Emperor's presence on his raised throne. Krennic approached, his boots echoing in the silence. He knelt instinctively, bowing his head before the ruler of the galaxy. "Rise, Director Krennic," the Emperor's voice commanded, a rasping tone that was both quiet and commanding. Krennic obeyed, his expression carefully neutral. He could feel the piercing gaze from beneath the Emperor's hood, as though the Dark Lord was dissecting every thought in his mind. "I am pleased you have come," the Emperor began. "There are matters requiring your insight." Krennic's heart leapt, though he remained outwardly composed. "It is an honor to serve your Majesty. How may I assist you?" The Emperor steepled his fingers, leaning slightly forward. "The Death Star," he said, his voice lingering on the words as if testing their weight. "Your creation, your ambition. Tell me, Director, is it ready to fulfill its purpose?" Krennic felt a surge of vindication. This was his moment. "Your Majesty, the Death Star is operational. Recent tests have proven its weapon capabilities beyond expectation. It is a marvel of engineering and the ultimate instrument of control. With it, the Empire will be unassailable." The Emperor remained silent for a moment, his pale face betraying no emotion. Krennic, emboldened, pressed on. "However, there have been challenges. Sabotage, delays caused by certain logistical hurdles. But these are under control. I assure you, the station's potential is unmatched." The Emperor tilted his head slightly. "And yet, others seem to question your ability to deliver on that potential." Krennic stiffened. He knew exactly to whom the Emperor referred. "Grand Moff Tarkin has sought to undermine my authority on the project. He underestimates the scope of what has been achieved. He cannot see beyond his own ambition." For the first time, the Emperor's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Ambition is a double-edged blade, is it not, Director?" Krennic nodded cautiously. "It is, Your Majesty, but my ambition is aligned with your vision. The Death Star will ensure order across the galaxy." "Indeed," the Emperor mused. His tone shifted, colder now. "But ambition without control can lead to failure. This weapon, the symbol of power, I cannot afford failure, Director." Krennic felt the weight of the statement like a physical blow. The Emperor's displeasure was lethal. "There will be no failure, Your Majesty. I will ensure it personally." The Emperor's yellow eyes bore into him, and for a moment, the room seemed to darken further. "See that you do," he said. "You will continue to oversee the project, but you will answer directly to me. Grand Moff Tarkin's oversight will remain, but your failures, should they occur, will be your own." Krennic's mind raced. This was both an opportunity and a threat. The Emperor had granted him a measure of recognition, but also tied his fate irrevocably to the success or failure of the Death Star. "I will not fail you, my Emperor," he said firmly. The Emperor leaned back into his throne, his demeanor shifting once more into an almost dismissive calm. "There is something else," he said. "The rebellion. They grow bold. Reports indicate their spies have taken an interest in the station. How do you intend to secure it?" Krennic's confidence returned. I have taken measures to eliminate security breaches. We are conducting thorough investigations, and additional safeguards have been implemented. The rebellion will not penetrate our defenses." The Emperor chuckled softly, a sound devoid of mirth. "Do not underestimate them, Director. They are more resourceful than they appear. If they succeed in obtaining the station's plans, the consequences would be catastrophic." Krennic felt a chill. He knew the stakes, but hearing them articulated by the Emperor added a new layer of gravity. "I will redouble our efforts. The rebellion will be crushed." The Emperor's gaze lingered on him, unblinking. "Good," he said finally. "You may leave, Director. Serve me well, and you shall be rewarded. Fail, and you will wish you had perished with your station." Krennic bowed deeply and turned to leave, his thoughts a whirlwind. The Emperor had given him what he desired, recognition and authority. But the price of failure had never been clearer. As he returned to his shuttle, he gazed out at the glittering expanse of Coruscant once more. It was a city of power, a monument to the Emperor's dominion. And he, Orson Krennic, had been called to play a part in preserving it. For now, that was enough. As Krennic's shuttle ascended from the landing platform and into Coruscant's dense traffic lanes, his thoughts grew heavier. The Emperor's words echoed in his mind, each one a reminder of the precarious line he walked. He had fought tooth and nail for his position, carving out his role in the Empire's vast machinery. Yet he was always on the verge of being overshadowed by Tarkin's towering presence or dismissed entirely by the Emperor's expectations. Back aboard his ship, Krennic opened a secure channel to his trusted aides. "Prepare the garrison on Scarif for a full-scale review," he ordered sharply. "Triple security rotations and conduct a comprehensive sweep for any vulnerabilities. I want every officer, every guard, every droid vetted. Nothing gets overlooked." "Yes, Director," came the immediate response. Ending the transmission, Krennic leaned back in his chair, staring out at the hyperspace lines stretching across the viewport. For all his confidence before the Emperor, he could not deny a flicker of doubt. The rebellion was a growing thorn in the Empire's side, and though they lacked the might to pose a true threat to the Death Star, their cunning was undeniable. The notion of spies infiltrating the project was not unfounded. If they succeeded, the repercussions would be devastating, not only for the Empire but for Krennic personally. Scarif, the heart of the Death Star's logistical and design operations, was already one of the most secure facilities in the galaxy. The entire planet was encased in layers of defenses, its data vaults protected by a vast garrison. Yet the Emperor's words had driven home a truth Krennic could not ignore. No system, no matter how fortified, was invulnerable. As the shuttle emerged from hyperspace and approached Scarif, the station's construction loomed in the distance. A sprawling marvel of engineering, its skeletal superstructure nearing completion. This was Krennic's triumph, his legacy. The years of effort, sacrifice, and political maneuvering had culminated in this weapon, this proof of his genius. But the Emperor had reduced it all to a single razor-thin edge: success or death. There would be no glory without perfection, no second chances if he faltered. Krennic's boots struck the polished floors of the Scarif facility as he stepped into the command center, his presence commanding immediate attention. Officers snapped to attention, and aides scurried to deliver status reports. He scanned the room, his eyes sharp, his posture rigid. The weight of the Emperor's trust and threat propelled him forward with renewed intensity. "Lieutenant Varys," Krennic snapped, singling out one of his senior officers, "I want a full report on all incoming personnel and cargo shipments over the last 2 months. Any irregularities, no matter how minor, are to be flagged and investigated immediately." Varys saluted crisply. "Yes, Director. I'll have the data compiled within the hour." Krennic nodded curtly, then turned to the console displaying the Death Star's operational progress. "And the weapon? Is it prepared for final testing?" An engineer stepped forward, his expression cautious but confident. "Yes, Director. The Kyber reactor is fully stabilized, and the Superlaser alignment is complete. We can initiate a test firing at your command." "Good," Krennic said, his voice icy. Schedule the test within the next cycle. Inform Tarkin that I will oversee it personally. I want no interruptions, no errors. The engineer hesitated for a split second at the mention of Tarkin but quickly recovered. Understood, Director. Krennic turned away, his cape trailing behind him as he strode toward the observation deck. He could see the distant star, the chosen target for the upcoming test, a reminder of the Death Star's destructive potential. This weapon was his lifeblood, the ultimate proof of his worth. But it was also his greatest vulnerability. If it succeeded, he could secure his place in the Emperor's favor. If it failed, the consequences would be unthinkable. As the hours ticked by, the preparations for the test progressed without incident. The command center buzzed with activity, every officer and technician operating at peak efficiency under Krennic's watchful eye. He could feel the tension in the room, the collective anticipation of what was to come. When the moment arrived, Krennic stood at the forefront of the observation deck, the sprawling viewport offering a clear view of the Death Star's superlaser dish. The room fell silent as he gave the order. Initiate firing sequence. The hum of the reactor swelled, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to shake the very air. The green beam of the superlaser surged forth, a blinding streak of light that connected with the distant star. For a brief moment, nothing happened. Then, the star erupted in a violent cascade of energy, its core destabilized by the immense force of the weapon. The room erupted into applause, but Krennic remained stoic, his eyes fixed on the dying star. He allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. This was his triumph, his proof that the Death Star was ready. But even as the room buzzed with celebration, Krennic knew the real test lay ahead. The Emperor would expect results, not just demonstrations. The Death Star's power needed to be wielded, not merely displayed. As the officers around him celebrated, Krennic turned to Varys. Compile the results and transmit them to Coruscant immediately. The Emperor will want confirmation of the test's success. Varys nodded, but before he could respond, an alarm blared throughout the command center. Krennic's satisfaction vanished in an instant, replaced by a cold, sinking feeling. "What's happening?" he demanded, his voice cutting through the noise. A technician scrambled to report. "Director, we've detected an unauthorized transmission originating from the lower levels. It appears to be data files from the Central Archive." Krennic's blood ran cold. The Emperor's warning about the rebellion resurfaced in his mind like a specter. "Seal the facility," he barked. "Lock down all exits and initiate a sweep of the archives. No one leaves until we identify the source." Even as the officers scrambled to execute his orders, Krennic's mind raced. The Emperor had entrusted him with the Death Star, and now, at the moment of his greatest achievement, his enemies had dared to infiltrate his stronghold. It was a humiliation he could not afford. This was no longer about ambition or recognition. It was a fight for survival, and Krennic, determined as ever, would not lose. The unauthorized transmission had pierced through Director Krennic's brief moment of triumph, leaving him seething with a volatile mix of anger and fear. The rebellion's audacity to infiltrate Scarif, his stronghold, was an insult he would not allow to stand. The Emperor's ominous warning about the consequences of failure now loomed larger than ever in his mind. Krennic straightened his posture, gripping the edge of the command console as if to steady the storm within. "Lieutenant Varys," Krennic snapped, his voice like a whip, "initiate an emergency summons to the 4th Fleet. I want all available vessels redirected to Scarif immediately." Varys hesitated, the enormity of the order evident in his wide-eyed expression. "The 4th Fleet, sir? That is 12 Imperial-class Star Destroyers and 14 Victory-class destroyers," Krennic interrupted coldly, cutting off any objection. "And if they are not in orbit around this planet within the next standard cycle, you'll wish you had been transferred to a garbage scow. Move." "Yes, Director." Varys saluted sharply, quickly relaying the orders. Krennic turned to the command room staff, his gaze like durasteel. "Prepare Scarif's orbital defense grid for heightened readiness. Activate the full array of planetary shields. I want a triple rotation on all scanner sweeps and fighter patrols. From this moment, no vessel approaches or departs Scarif without my explicit authorization. Is that clear? The room responded with a unified, "Yes, Director." The officers and technicians immediately set to work, their movements brisk and purposeful under the weight of his command. Moments later, Krennic stepped onto the observation deck, his hands clasped tightly behind his back as he stared out at the stars. The glittering view of Scarif's pristine blue surface, framed by its lush tropical islands, was soon to be overshadowed by the arrival of the Fourth Fleet, a force so vast it would blot out the skies. Krennic's decision to call for such overwhelming reinforcements was not made lightly. The Death Star project had always been a target, its secrecy paramount to the Empire's plans. But this incident changed everything. The Emperor's confidence in Krennic was already conditional. Any further breaches would surely result in his execution or worse. By summoning the Fourth Fleet, Krennic sought to project absolute dominance. This would not only deter future rebel incursions but also remind his rivals, especially Tarkin, of his unrelenting resolve. If anyone doubted his control over the Death Star project, the sight of nearly 30 destroyers encircling Scarif would serve as a resounding answer. Hours passed with frenetic activity in the command center. Officers reported in rapid succession, tracking the incoming fleet's progress and coordinating planetary defenses. Krennic monitored everything closely, allowing no margin for error. He reviewed troop deployments, inspected fighter squadrons, and personally oversaw the preparation of Scarif's garrison for potential combat. When the first ships of the Fourth Fleet emerged from hyperspace, Krennic allowed himself a grim smile. The massive forms of Imperial-class star destroyers slid gracefully into orbit, their dagger-like profiles a symbol of Imperial might. Flanking them were the slightly smaller but no less intimidating Victory-class destroyers, their reinforced hulls bristling with weaponry. Each ship carried advanced fighter complements, including squadrons of TIE interceptors and bombers equipped for rapid response and heavy assaults. As the fleet settled into formation, Krennic's comm officer announced, "Director, the commanding officer of the Fourth Fleet, Admiral Vorn, is requesting to speak with you." Krennic stepped to the holodable, where the blue, flickering image of Admiral Vorn materialized. The Admiral, a stern man with a chiseled face and sharp, calculating eyes, saluted crisply. "Director Krennic," Vorn began, his tone formal. "The Fourth Fleet has arrived in full strength and is assuming a defensive perimeter around Scarif. All ships stand ready to enforce your directives." "Excellent, Admiral," Krennic replied, his voice edged with authority. "Scarif is now the most critical installation in the Empire. The security breach we just experienced was a fluke, an anomaly I will not allow to repeat. Your fleet will ensure that nothing, and no one, threatens this facility. Is that understood?" "Understood, Director. Any hostile activity will be met with overwhelming force," Vorn affirmed. "Good," Krennic said. "I will forward specific directives regarding patrol patterns and interdiction protocols. In the meantime, ensure that all shipboard sensors are synced with Scarif's orbital grid. I want every movement tracked, analyzed, and reported to me immediately." "As you command," Vorn acknowledged. The hologram blinked out, and Krennic returned to the viewport. The sight of the Fourth Fleet in orbit gave him a sense of satisfaction, though he knew this was only the beginning. The rebellion had proven its resourcefulness once already. This show of force was as much a declaration as it was a deterrent. He watched as squadrons of TIE fighters and interceptors streaked through the atmosphere in tight formations, their engines screaming against the backdrop of the stars. The destroyers maintained their positions in a perfect sphere around the planet, their turbolaser batteries trained outward in anticipation of any threat. This was the Empire at its most unyielding, and Krennic intended to ensure that no one, rebel, rival, or otherwise, could pierce its defenses. This new outlook gave Krennic a singular focus. His ambitions, once centered on personal glory, now shifted toward survival and dominance. The Emperor's warning had stripped away any illusions of invulnerability, replacing them with a sharp, ruthless clarity. If he was to endure, he would need to prove that he could not only create the Empire's most powerful weapon but protect it with unwavering precision. The Fourth Fleet was a declaration not just to the rebels but to the entire galaxy. Scarif and the Death Star were untouchable.